Welcome back to another edition of Gen XYZ, where we have three generations that have to work together and get along in the workforce. And we talk about the issues that we encounter and hopefully find ways to solve them. Today, specifically, we are talking about red flags that candidates can look out for on job descriptions or in the interview process. So before we get to our list of 20 red flags, I'm Pete, I'm the Gen Xer.
I'm Peter. I am your resident millennial.
I'm excited to hear what the resident millennial has to say about these red flags today. I'm the inquisitive Gen Zer, Ashley.
We love our resident millennial, Ashley. We know that. That's a given.
I've got plenty of opinion.
Well, we're going to hear them in just a minute. So let's get right to it. As the old guy, I guess I have to say it, I've seen these things a lot. And you see them over and over, a surprising amount of time. And if you stay with us today, we're going to share 20 red flags to look out for. So let's just get it kicked off with the first one. The first job description red flag is when it says work hard, play hard. Gross. What do you guys think about that?
I feel like this is one of those ones that it's become kind of overused so much that maybe employers, they try to stay away from it now at this point. But yeah, that's one of those areas where I feel like maybe the intentions are good. They're saying like, hey, it can be hard here, but we compensate you by, I guess, like going out for drinks after work. That's what it means to me. But yeah, that's an area that I feel like it can conceal some kind of weird stuff going on.
I've definitely seen this work hard, play hard red flag before in a job description, and it ended up being a pyramid scheme. And it's always good to keep your eyes peeled out for this one because the job ended up being what I did not expect.
Safe to say then, work hard, play hard equates to a lot of work, not a lot of play. And that's what they want to sell as their culture, right? And I would say anytime you see culture overused, there's probably some red flags associated with just that. Let's move on. Peter, what's next?
One of the red flags that I frequently see, and it's kind of overlooked, is asking the person who's going to fill this job to wear many hats. We always see that phrase, this job requires someone to wear a lot of hats. And that's not necessarily bad because smaller companies, maybe they don't have the budget, somebody who's going to jump around and handle a little bit of this, a little bit of that. People like that. And some people seek out those types of jobs. But an area that needs to be kept an eye on is that sometimes this means that they are going to pay you for one job and expect you to do 2 or 3 jobs. So definitely keep an eye on that.
So the red flag, wearing too many hats. When I hear that one, I immediately wonder, do they actually know what this job is? Are they using that phrase because they're unable to describe what the day-to-day responsibilities are and they're going to figure it out as you go? That's something to be cautious of as a candidate. So when you see that phrase, ask them to clarify. Maybe you will be in a role that requires jack of all trade skills, and that's okay. But as long as they can quantify and explain what those are, that's really important before you take the next step and accept the job. All right. So Ashley, what's up next?
About being like a family. Now this one kind of reminds me of Olive Garden. You know their slogan, they're like, at Olive Garden, we're family. This is completely separate. We're talking about lack of boundaries. To me, I'm going to use the classic Gen Z word, toxic work environment. You want your family life to be separate from your coworkers, your boss. You do not want that language in a job description. Stay clear from that.
So at the end of the day, a job is a job and a family is a family. You can be friends with your coworkers. You can be close with your coworkers, but they should not be conflated. They're different things. And something that this screams to me is lack of boundaries. And it is an area that I feel pretty strongly about, that you should always be able to either, say no or move on from a job or whatever. This is telling me that the job is going to guilt trip you. Maybe they don't pay well, but they're, hey, we're family, we're close. You should just put up with it because you have to put up with your family. This is not how it works in the professional world. This is not something that you should be expecting from your job, and your job should not expect from you.
It's different if you are working for a family business. That's a whole other story.
So in a family business, you actually are a family. So you can't get away from that one, I don't think. Good point, Ashley. Let me tackle the next one, guys. Excessive requirements. If you see a job description that makes you wonder how you're going to be able to do all of those things, you should be concerned. An example might be a project manager role where it also requires the candidate to do software coding and quality assurance and business requirements gathering. If you're a project manager, you should be hired to manage projects. So when you see too many requirements listed, the alarm bell should be going off.
Yeah, this kind of relates back to wearing too many hats. This tells me that the company is either being too cheap or doesn't want to, or for whatever reason, they want to have the ideal person who's going to be able to do three different jobs at once and do them all well. That's not how the real world works. If you're hired for one specific role, you should be doing that specific role. And if there's too many requirements on the job description, that tells me that they may not even really know what's going to be required of that job.
What's the opposite of excessive requirements? Vague requirements. That's also a red flag. When there's not too much detail in the job description, you don't know what their expectations are. I've actually witnessed before, and I questioned it. I was like, what am I getting myself into if I were to apply to this role?
We talk to candidates a lot about researching the job description so you know what questions to ask in an interview. And when the requirements are vague, that's the opportunity to figure out, do they know what's needed in the job? Is it vague for a bad reason or just because it's a new role and maybe they're figuring it out? Those are things to nail down in the interview, not once you get in there on your first day. So if you see vague requirements, may not be inherently bad, but it is something you need to drill down on to figure out what the real story is.
If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And this is a job that you're going to be held to a certain standard to do. How are you going to know if you are doing a good job if they can't even quantify or specifically lay out what they actually want you to do? So definitely an area that you want to nail down before you take the job or even move forward in the interview process.
Peter, this one is so big that it's even become law in a number of states. What is it?
Listing the salary in the job description. A job that does not list the salary in the job description is a red flag for me. And I'll tell you why. That is something that screams to me that they are either going to try to lowball you or negotiate. They don't want to put it out there. If they have something to hide, that's usually not a good thing. So make sure that you can see that up front. Make sure that you're looking for jobs that are transparent about their hiring process. And part of the hiring process is what the salary range is.
I can give a lot of reasons, truth be told, of why the salary might not be listed in the job description. So even though it is required in a lot of states, and in a way it could be a red flag, I don't see it as cause for too much concern because you can always ask. And that may not be a statement everyone agrees with, but it's sort of a modern thing, a new thing for companies to list salaries in the job description. When I was, growing up in the world of recruiting, that was never done. And it's only been in the last 5 years where it's become really prevalent, and probably 10 years where it's really been done at all. And there's some different schools of thought associated with that. Some companies don't want to rule out a candidate because of salary, right? They want to have that conversation live, and maybe they don't even know what the salary is. So there's a lot of reasons why it's not there. It's a red flag, or at least something to catch your attention. But don't run away from a job just because it doesn't list a salary. It's not necessarily a terrible thing.
Sometimes don't they just want to try to match what salary you had in your previous job?
That's interesting that you mentioned that, Ashley, because I tell candidates this, and I've told newer recruiters in the field. Really, the salary that someone had at their last job is not actually relevant. It's what they need to make a move that is the real magic number. Candidates, when you're looking for a job, it doesn't matter if you made X. If you need Y going forward, and maybe your lifestyle circumstances have changed, what have you, you're looking to make a move, Y is really the only number that matters. So just make sure you're being honest with the recruiters about what number you need to feel comfortable with.
Peter, I'm 100% on the same page with you about that. I've never liked it when companies want to know what a candidate made in the past. Now, I want to clarify this. In the recruiting process, it's a common thing to talk about in terms of what a candidate needs in order to be interested in a job. But it's going forward, not looking backwards. It should never be about that. And it's done too often today. I think that's intrusive. I think it's private. And I think it's none of the company's business what you've made in the past. So if you're a candidate, don't feel pressured to produce a paycheck of the past or a W-2. That's none of the employer's business going forward. I believe very strongly in that. So I'll get off my soapbox on that point.
Let me jump in on the next red flag. Extended vacancy. Now, this is a little bit of a tricky one because you might not necessarily be able to see it up front. Some job boards will have how long a job has been open, but not every one of them. So do a little bit of homework on this. But a job that has been open for an extremely long period of time tells me that there's something wrong with the job. The job market is very hot right now. So why haven't they been able to fill it? Are they being too specific with their requirements? Is the pay too low? Is the company, culture not good? Is the onboarding process not good? There is any number of reasons, but it seems strange to me if a job that other companies are able to fill in, say, 2 weeks has been open for 6 months at a company.
I'll counter that a little bit, Peter, just to say that sometimes a job has been open because it's a really hard to fill position and there's not too many candidates who can do the role. And that's a good reason for a job to be open a long time if you're the candidate who meets those requirements. But generally speaking, there's a lot of other reasons why it could be a problem. So ask. Always ask when you have the opportunity very clearly, why has this job been open for so long? And then make your decision on how to proceed based on what the answer is.
We've talked a lot about stuff that's going to be red flags on the job posting online, stuff that you would see as you're just browsing through openings. Let's move on to things that would be red flags in the actual interview process.
A disjointed hiring process is a red flag to look out for. So, what do I mean by disjointed? I mean cumbersome, inefficient, super slow. It takes forever to get a hold of the organization and they take forever to respond back to you. Communication is lacking. These are all things that you need to look out for.
Being a recruiter, I can tell you that there's nothing worse than when a company is disorganized in their hiring process because it sends such a bad signal to candidates and naturally will make them wonder what's underneath the surface here. Are there bigger problems that I'm yet to uncover? So if anyone who's hiring is listening, make sure you don't do that. But for candidates, always ask for details as much as you can. How long the hiring process is going to take, how many interviews there are, how many people are involved in the decision. The more details you can have, the better. And when those answers aren't forthcoming, you should be concerned.
A big red flag for me is an awkward or negative interview experience. There can be any number of reasons why the interview went bad. Maybe the person just simply wasn't good at giving interviews, which we've got videos on that if you're a manager. But at the end of the day, an interview is a chance for you to put your best foot forward, and the company should be doing the same thing back. They should be putting their best foot forward. So having an interviewer who is disinterested or distracted or checking their phone, doing anything like that kind of puts you off, that's disrespectful of your time. So that's a big red flag for me. Someone who is not trying to make a great first impression to you.
Making a great first impression should be incumbent upon the company doing the interview. And the way to do that as much as anything is to be prepared. And if they're not prepared, if they're surprised to see you or they're late or they don't have questions already ready to go in advance, that's a red flag. And as a candidate, I recommend strongly considering whether that's a place you want to work.
Inappropriate questions is perhaps the biggest red flag of all. Why? Because it's illegal, super prohibited to be asked. These questions include getting asked about your race, sexual orientation, marital status. These are all things that should be avoided and you shouldn't have to answer. It shouldn't matter when you're being hired and it shouldn't matter when you're working there.
Yep, you said it. These are illegal things. A big red flag is being asked any of them, anything about, your race, gender, background, any of these things that do not matter to the job at all, because you should be getting this job purely based on your merit, your skills, how good you are a fit for this company.
Companies that ask candidates to jump through too many hoops is a red flag in the interview process because it shows a lack of respect for the candidate's time. And I'm talking about things like excessive interview prep and filling out lengthy applications. It's just an unnecessary part of the process. And if they're putting that burden on you, it's a sign of probably not great things to come.
Yeah, this is something that is a pet peeve of mine. Companies that have inefficient or redundant processes that seem to have no purpose other than to make you do them and I guess prove your worth to them. Companies that are like, hey, can you please send me your resume and then re-input all the information into X, Y, and Z platforms? Things like that. They just scream inefficient and they just scream that a company you should stay away from.
Getting asked to work for free is a huge red flag. Your time is valuable. You should be paid for it.
I do want to point out when you hear people talk about working for free and these horror stories where they ask you to do entire weekend presentations. That's not what that's not always the case. Some companies will ask you to do maybe a take-home test or something, and that's fine as long as it's something that maybe takes less than 30 minutes, an hour max. You should not be spending hours upon hours doing work for a company for free. That is not something that is okay, and is definitely, like Ashley said, a huge red flag.
A work for free red flag that I've encountered. I applied to work at a hair salon. This was a little while ago. And they asked me on the spot during the interview if I could help them clean their upstairs. And I'm like, okay. So I start cleaning their upstairs for 2 hours. And in the end, I was not compensated for it. So what did I do? I left and I never went back. And now I know working for free, huge red flag. They shouldn't do that to you.
So they asked you to clean for them as a way of proving yourself in the interview?
Well, for starters, as soon as I told them I was Portuguese, they were like, "Oh, hey, can you come clean the upstairs?" So I guess there was some stereotype where they were like, because she's Portuguese and a lot of Portuguese people are cleaning ladies, she asked me to clean the upstairs.
Okay, I didn't know that, and I certainly wouldn't associate it with the interview process. But yeah, I think we can chalk that up as multiple red flags and under one scenario for sure. It's awful. When it's time for the job offer, it should be a great situation. Everyone should be happy. But unfortunately, at times, candidates are pressured into accepting quickly, maybe even immediately. Common courtesy and even professional courtesy dictates that a candidate should have time to consider the offer and not have to make a decision on the spot.
Yeah, changing jobs is a huge life event. So asking somebody to make a split decision, that just tells me that the kind of company they are. And what do you think it's going to be like when you're working there and you have actual deadlines or you have work to be done? That tells me they don't respect your time and that they are working on their own timetable and they aren't even considering your feelings, your life outside of work. So definitely something to steer clear of.
And when that happens as a candidate, you should probably wonder what they're trying to hide and pushing you to make a decision so quickly. It's probably something worth knowing.
A refusal to negotiate is a huge red flag. Negotiating is always a part of the hiring process and is standard practice. If they're refusing to negotiate with you, then don't continue with them.
Maybe they're not flexible on the salary or the work hours or whether you can work remotely, but a company should at least hear you out as a candidate and acknowledge your concerns, what you want to negotiate, whether they can agree or not. It's just courteous to have an exchange and a discussion.
So when talking about high pressure offers and refusals to negotiate on companies' behalf, we also have to mention companies that want you to immediately quit your job to start. That's also a red flag. It's a little bit more subtle, but it's something that's just as important. You should be trying to do your due diligence, have professional courtesy. If you're working in a current job, give them the standard 2 weeks. They might not have you work it out, but it's still the right thing to do to try to never burn that bridge and to leave on good terms. So a company that wants you to disregard, that's a red flag to me, because if they're willing to have you, burn bridges or ruin your professional reputation, what else are they willing to do?
It's not just a red flag, it's a violation, a blatant violation of the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated. And no company wants an employee to leave without giving notice. There's lots of reasons for that, which everyone understands and knows. So any company that asks you to quit without offering notice to your current employer is one that I strongly recommend staying away from.
So these next few red flags are a little bit outside of the onboarding process. They're a little bit more abstract, I'll say, but these are company characteristics that you should look out for. They're not as black and white and they're not as easy to maybe see on the front end, but they are equally as important.
Let's start with the big one. High turnover is a red flag in every scenario. And if you're a candidate interviewing, you should ask them about it. What is their turnover? Every company knows whether they're willing to share. If they're hesitant to do it, that's a concern. Or if they give a number that sounds really large to you. And every situation is a little bit different, but you should also take that into consideration when deciding whether to proceed with the interview or even with accepting an offer.
Questions to ask the hiring manager to gain a little more insight regarding high turnover include: why is this position open? And how long was the last person in this role for.
You definitely don't want to deal with any companies that are kind of reluctant to share their turnover rates. As we've said many times before, transparency is key in this. And if they're trying to hide something, there's probably a reason that they're trying to hide it.
Bad company morale is a red flag 10 out of 10 times. If you're walking into a situation as a new employee, you want it to be a good one. You want to go into a company that people like showing up to every day. Otherwise, they're going to drag you down from the moment you get there.
This one's a little bit of a hard thing to figure out on the front end if you're looking out into the company from the outside. But if you can, try to talk to some current employees, maybe people that you aren't interviewing with, but are just, regular producing employees, maybe not high level managers, somebody who you think will give you an honest review of the company and what a day to day is like. Asking even your interviewer and other managers, what does a average day look like? What do you do about morale with your company? A good company should have a plan in place around that and should have good answers to explain how they keep their employees motivated.
Another option, if you're on site, is to job shadow or stay around and observe for a while after the interview. If the company's not willing to let you do that, that's a red flag in and of itself.
So, something that I really hate with companies is a lack of communication. This is an area that's so easy to get right, yet so many companies get it wrong. Make sure that you are talking to the company in a way that is clear and indicates your desires and your needs and what you are looking for, and then expect the same from them. Because a company that is unable to articulate and is unable to keep up with you in real time and share updates is a company that you don't want to spend time with.
A couple things to look out for here is, are they responsive in their communication? And do they keep their time commitments? And if not, that's a problem.
A red flag to look out for if you're armed with your questions and you're in the interview process is if the company is lacking transparency. So if you're asking them about pay or career advancement and they're not really giving you any intel on this, that's not a good sign.
This is something that we've mentioned multiple times through this video. Lacking transparency is a huge red flag. It's something that's so easy to get right, but so many companies get it wrong. Just be upfront with your candidates. It helps build rapport, it helps build trust. If there's a delay in the interview process because so and so quit, tell the candidate that. They're people. They can understand that. You're having an interview process. We're dealing with humans. It's perfectly fine. You do not have to be perfect, but be upfront with the candidates. And if you're a candidate and you are getting the runaround and you don't really know where you are in this interview process, that's a red flag and you should probably stay away from this company.
It's 2024. Is there any better place to find red flags on a company than online reviews?
Online reviews are the number one thing that every candidate that I've talked to goes to. When you're looking at a company and you say, hey, this job looks great, I want to apply to it, what's the first thing they do? They're going to go look at Glassdoor or Google or even Yelp in some cases, on LinkedIn, reviews, whatever. These are the things that help build an online brand. So having poor reviews online, that's a number one red flag for me.
So that's a wrap. There's our 20 red flags. And if you forget about them already, you can either rewatch this video or go to zengig.com and find the long list there.
Goodbye for now.